proposing that the next big thing in transportation is a single-mode transit system. In other words, a single-vehicle transit system. And it is based on solar-powered cars on a separated roadway, and they're self-driving. And this creates a new system. It's actually a transportation paradigm shift, because we have individualized cars on a mass transit system and a high-speed mass transit system. It's the self-driving vehicles link up once they get to a station, and they link up in the roadway. Now, this isn't a guideway. It's actually just an isolated roadway that follows a rail for power. So the roadway powers the electric cars, and then the roadway gets its power primarily from solar. So, and it turns out there's a lot of solar power available when you cover the roof of the roadway with solar energy. This system is designed to attract as many users as possible. I did not want to put any limitations in the system so that we would exclude, a part of the traveling population. We wanted to include as many people, and that means be flexible on the vehicle that we can allow into the system. It does have to be electric, and it does have to be able to follow the rules once it's in the system. And as I think you'll see, it can generate a lot of revenue. Let's go on a trip. Let's go from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. How do we do that? We pick up our cell phone and we call for a car. We can either call for an individual car, or we can just call for a seat in a car to ride share with someone. The car picks us up, takes us to a station, and zaps us to Las Vegas in less than 2 hours. We're exiting our station. The car doesn't even stop there at the station. It drives us now to our hotel. So in one vehicle, I've gone from my home into the mass transit system, zapped across country, and now I'm being delivered on the streets again to my hotel. Let's take a comparison to the modes here. It's a 270-mile trip. If I were to take my own car and do this, it would take me 4.5 hours. And according to the IRS, allowing for depreciation and maintenance and insurance and all that, and the cost of the vehicle fuel, it's $155 for this 270-mile trip. If I chose to go by bus and ride with other folks, it would take me over 5 hours and cost about $48. If you consider flying and the time it takes you to go through the airport, then to fly to Las Vegas would take 3.5 hours, and the best price I found was $193. And unfortunately, by train, Amtrak doesn't seem to go there. So let's compare that to Freedom Mass Transit. Freedom Mass Transit gets you there in less than 2 hours. Costs $115 to rent the vehicle to take you. If you own your own car capable of working with the system, then it's $82 for the trip. And if you're willing to ride share with other people, and you want to ride with 4 other people, it's less than $30 for the trip. If you're willing to ride share for 6, it's less than $20 per trip. Again, the idea here is to get as many people as possible to ride the system. And that way, we generate the kind of revenue we need to pay for it. So this is a single mode, single vehicle transit, mass transit system. It could replace all other forms. We could replace, because we're eliminating the distance limitation on electric cars because the roadway powers the car, we could convert everyone to electric vehicles and eliminate fuel-powered cars. We could, since we're on an elevated roadway, we won't need the freeways anymore or toll roads, no trains, no buses, no short-haul air flights. Why? Because they can't compete. They just aren't as fast, as cheap, or as safe. Consider the safety. As someone else mentioned, there's 33,000, in excess of 33,000 fatalities on our nation highways each year. In the Freedom Mass Transit, you're riding in a single lane, concrete tube, or not tube, channel, and there's no possibility of any kind of cross traffic getting to you. It's a very safe, weatherproof, because there's a roof over it, system. It's also very fast, proposing 140 miles per hour speed. This is actually faster than flying when you consider the airport time, out to about 700 miles. The cost per a trip, if you rent a vehicle from us, 43 cents a mile. Pretty inexpensive. This is what the initial corridors would look like. These corridors were picked out actually by HighSpeed Rail, and they represent some of the highest traffic corridors in the country. An average annual daily traffic of between 200,000 and 400,000 vehicles. If this were implemented, it would generate a net revenue of $31 million per mile. That's at 73% of the average annual daily traffic that's currently on those roads. High-speed rail, let's compare high-speed rail to Freedom Mass Transit. High-speed rail is really good for 200 to 600 miles trips, city to city. That's what it's designed for, high-speed link between major cities. Freedom Mass Transit, on the other hand, is designed for 10 miles to 700 miles is where we're hit. You can go city to city, but you can also do local trips of 10 to 60 miles. The difference here is that with Freedom Transit, we're picking up the local traffic, the local commutes in and out of the metropolitan areas, as well as the traffic going city to city. And it would be on demand 24/7. Fares also are per vehicle, not per passenger. And so you can choose to ride by yourself or with one to however many people your vehicle handles. Let's take a look at the maximum traffic, the maximum usage that these systems could handle. There's a proposal now in California for 520 miles of track between Los Angeles and San Jose. What's the maximum load that system could handle? How many passengers could that take? Well, if we ran 12 trains per hour, 1,000 seats per train, and we assumed a 70% load factor, that turns out to 123 million passengers a year. What do they estimate? Approximately 33 million passengers per year. Let's take a look at Freedom Mass Transit. 520 miles, same route, but we have stations every 5 miles. That means we could have trips, in this case, the simulation said trips of 30 miles each. There's 105 stations along the route. Maximum number of trips that could be made, 2.5 billion 30-mile trips. What we'd really expect is somewhere around 949 million trips. That's based on, again, average annual daily traffic of the current corridor. Let's take a look at the Amtrak proposal for the Northwest Corridor. That's 427 miles, 430 miles or so. They're proposing at 220 miles. Freedom Transit runs at 140. There'd be 17 stations for high-speed rail, 87 for Freedom Transit. The high-speed rail would stop between 4 and 16 times making the trip. Freedom Transit is basically nonstop until you get to the station you want. All the stations are offline. The trip time is the same, even though the train goes twice as fast almost, because it has to stop at intermediate stations, making the average time approximately the same as Freedom Transit. Current fare, I looked up the current fares for trips between Boston and New York City, and they run between $115 and $220, depending on what train you want, what time of day, and whether it's an express and the class of service. The estimated cost for Freedom Transit to do the trip from Boston to New York, $91.58. Annually, they expect the high-speed rail to generate $4.5 million in revenue annually. Look at Freedom Transit, 1.1. Oh, wait a minute, I'm making this wrong. I'm sorry, that was trips, annual trips, 4.3 million, 4.43 million trips. However, with Freedom Transit, at 40-mile trips in this example, 1.1 billion is what the network would handle. And that would mean that you could, the commuters from, say, Boston down to just coming into Boston could use the system. What's the minimum trip? Let me get rid of this. What's the minimum trip is like 10 miles. You know how long it takes to go 10 miles? 4 minutes. So a 20-mile trip would take you 8 minutes. Somebody mentioned that they were coming here to the conference. They had to drive across town here, and it took them almost an hour to go 20 miles. With this system, if it were available here, you could drive your car to a station, get into the station, get into the system. That might take you a minute or two. Then you'd zap for 20 miles and get there in 8 minutes and be exiting the station and then driving on to your final location. So ridership for the high-speed rail, again, was 43 million in 2040. I'm proposing if we built the Freedom Transit, it'd be 1.1 billion in 2030. Annual revenue, that's the big number there. And the high-speed rail expected 4.6 billion in annual revenue. How about Freedom Transit, 11.8 billion. Contrast that to the cost to build. Amtrak was 115 billion to build, and they make 4.6 billion a year. Look at Freedom Transit, 22 billion to build, and 11 billion, almost 12 billion a year annual net revenue. This is what the high-speed rail for the whole country might look like, and I don't want to spend a lot of time with this. It's the same thing would happen with Freedom Transit. We'd want to expand it, but there's a difference. With the Freedom Transit routes, remember we do just the original corridors. Once those were built and paid for, then there was revenue. The revenue generated, at least a portion of it, could be used then to fill in the nationwide network. We'd use it to expand that that revenue made by the initial would expand the network. There's really three businesses here. There's the roadway, the toll road business, an example of what it looks like there. There's the energy business, the solar panels, and then the vehicles. Let's take a look at each one briefly here. The roadway business, the toll road business, costs $37 million a mile to build. Average revenue, again, at our average annual daily traffic, at 73% of that on the major routes, gives us $13 million net revenue per year. Energy business is even better. Cost of the solar panel, $6.8 million, based on the latest prices I got off the internet. $6.8 million per mile. But what's it make? It makes $5.8 million a year. Solar pays for itself very quickly. Vehicle business, take 15 million a mile to supply the vehicles to support this traffic load. Average annual revenue, 12 million. So the car's good business too. Solar's a great business. Cars are good business. And even the toll road pays for itself in a couple of years. I propose that there be a nonprofit organization that manages the construction of these things and that licenses the technology. I've been messing with transportation for about 20 years. I didn't really get serious until I had a technology that I got patented for controlling the vehicles very precisely within the network. At 140 miles an hour, I should be able to control their position plus or minus an inch. And until that technology was sure, I didn't really get serious. So, to go on here, toll road funding, it would handle the approvals, licensing, permits, things like that, marketing it in each thing. It just seems like it would be a good idea to have an organization that knew how to do this and got very good at it, and it would manage the projects all across the country. Now, what do I consider a project? A project is any, like, let's say one of the routes was Tampa to Orlando. That would be a project. Orlando to Miami, another project. Boston to New York might have been a project. And that this nonprofit organization would manage those installations and enforce standards. Here's the way I see the breakdown coming. Government puts in 30%, which it eventually gets back in taxes. And the institutional revenue, institutional investors also put in 30%. These are the big investors. The nonprofit organization also puts in money. And the reason for that is that the nonprofit organization would be the repository for the super fund that would expand the network once the initial network was paid for. Individual investors are also invited. Want to open up the opportunity to small investors. $1,000 minimum investment. Unless we don't want the billionaires to take over this project, so we limit it to $500,000 as a maximum investment in any one project. It kind of spreads the revenue around. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this chart. What I want to say here is that according to that reference there, the average high-speed rail speed is around 140 miles an hour. It turns out that's what I had picked also. And I wanted to point out also for high-speed, for the Freedom Transit, that the stations are available every 5 miles. And there's the 10-mile trip, takes 4.3 minutes. And that would probably be the minimum. I don't think it would be worth it to get on, you know, go 5 miles and get off again. But 10 miles, maybe. How would you like a particular trip? This is the Zap Times. Might want to call it Zap Times. Washington to Baltimore, 18 minutes. How much does it cost? $18, basically. Pick out a favorite city there. How about Los Angeles to San Diego? Less than an hour at $51, $52 for the trip. That's renting the vehicle. That's not owning it. Here's how the costs break down. The guideway fee is 18 cents per mile. Power used, 7 cents per mile. Vehicle rental, 12 cents. For a total of about 43 cents a mile to rent a vehicle. Or if you own your own vehicle, it's about 30 cents a mile. I've got a tax bonus in there, and that's, I can explain later if you'd like. But that's where some of the tax revenue comes from. Almost 15,000 solar panels per mile, generating 4.5 megawatts per mile. This covers the roadway. This roadway has 3 channels. one in each direction, and a center channel to handle maintenance. Let's say somebody was suggested, and it's something I was worried about, what if a vehicle breaks down? What happens? I have to shut down that segment. So the vehicles in the station before the breakdown has to start exiting people, because we don't want other traffic coming into a dead section. But that station not only exits people, but then it starts the process of moving a gate, and we can flip to the center lane to bypass trouble. And then the center lane will stay will continue to route the traffic at speed until we clear the problem on the direction, whatever the failure was. This is an estimate of the solar business. Solar installation per mile, 6.8 million, and the revenue, as you can see, is pretty good. 4.5 megawatts generated. Vehicle rental. I've done some studies, and it looks like we could have a rental vehicle, a standard, 4-passenger vehicle, at about 38,000 with minimal batteries and electric. Its life as a rental vehicle would be about 500,000 miles. Build in a 63% profit for the owner of the rental vehicle, and you come up with a fee that's about 12 cents per mile. Energy efficiency, that's a major thing that this system could offer. If you just convert to electric cars from internal combustion engine, there's a huge savings there. Huge savings. Fuel cost reduction of 74%. Electric motors are so much more efficient. Single vehicles. When you're driving your car down the highway, down the interstate, once you get to a free open stretch of highway, if you're traveling at 70, 80, 90 miles an hour, your car uses 40% more fuel than it does driving at, say, 50 miles an hour. So there's a cost for going fast. If I platoon the electric vehicles into platoons of 6 vehicles each, and with very close following distances, we can reduce the energy of the group by over 400%. So platooning the vehicles and having a very close tolerance between them so that they draft with each other saves a lot of energy. It also raises the capacity of the guideway to 22,000 vehicles per hour. And that's at just 70% of the guideway. Okay. So that's pretty much the idea. I think I've gotten it all across to you. The one thing I want to talk a little bit is airlines. Airlines use most of their fuel on takeoff and landing. 2/3 of the flights, the domestic flights, are less than 700 miles. That means most of them are short haul. Freedom Transit could replace 2/3 of the domestic airline flights. You might want to worry about the stations. How many vehicles could I merge from a station? 4,320. That means there's 4 staging areas, and each one launches a vehicle every 12 merges, 12 sets of vehicles every minute. Single mode transit. It's a paradigm shift, individual mass car transit. Car ownership. Benefits of car ownership without having to own a car. Fast travel across town or across country. It's much safer, low cost ridership if you share rides. Revenue for small investors, and a huge tax revenue. And that's my project. And I thank you for all listening. If you have questions, I'd love to talk about it. Thank you.